I personally didn't know babies born at 21 weeks could survive on their own, even if it was for a minute.
If you would have gotten the abortion, she would have felt that.
And I think it's just that women have been told a lie that it's not a baby yet.
And instead, you gave your daughter the gift of life. And you allowed her to live and feel your love.
She shouldn't have been able to survive.
Even though it almost took you, you can live with the peace. I gave my daughter life. I chose life. Hey, welcome back to the podcast. I am here with Brittany, who I saw your story online, and I reached out to you and asked if you would share the story of baby Mila, and you so graciously accepted. So I want to say thank you for honoring us by sharing your story, because it's going to encourage people.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I feel like an opportunity like this really helps me, have her life have a legacy, and so I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, she has a legacy, and it will continue to have a legacy and a purpose. And I think it's so important because this is a testimony. And, it's important for people to hear stories for when things don't go the way we want, that we can still trust God and thank God, and we can question him and let him walk us through a healing and restoration process as well. So this is such an important thing, and I'm so thankful that you're sharing this, because this kind of stuff happens to so many people.
Oh, it happens so often.
Yeah.
And I think in today's day and age, we always hear of the miracle stories where you do get the miracle you asked for. And I would be lying if I said I wasn't praying that my daughter would be here today.
Absolutely.
But I think also we have to realize we live in a world where there's sin and things don't go the way that we always kind of ask or pray for. And I think the message, through it all, is that God is still good. And we just have to rely on the fact that our miracles might not look exactly like everyone else's.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even when things in the natural don't make sense. And I think sometimes you might never understand why, but yet we still trust and have faith that even when our circumstances don't make sense, that he is good and that he will work it all for good.
Exactly. And I think one of the things, and I'll be honest, it's almost a year after the death of our daughter, and, I almost passed away. And so I think I don't always have the perfect answer yet.
Yeah.
And who knows if I'll ever get that here. But I do know that the story can be used for his glory, and in all things, he's still good. And I might be searching some days for the reason, the days that I feel a little bit more down about just not having her here with us. But I think when I do have those days and I look back at all the blessings I've been given through this experience, that I just can't help but see that God is faithful in any situation.
And you've kept going. You haven't given up. And I think that's such an important thing, is that you could have given up, but you didn't.
I think when the Lord literally gives you a second chance at life, you have to use it.
Okay, so let's get into the story about baby Mila.
Yeah.
So start us off. You get pregnant?
Yes. So I found out I was pregnant. I want to say it was July of 2023. I have 2 other kids as well, but this would have been my third. And just from the beginning, I found out I was pregnant. Everything was fine. About 5 weeks in, I had signs that maybe I was having a miscarriage. So I went into urgent care. We were on a trip at the time. And I kind of just asked to get checked out. And the doctor literally said, "You're having a miscarriage. There's nothing I can do. Go home and the rest of it will come out," I guess. To be quite frank, is what she said.
Oh.
So I had begged her essentially for a day and a half for an ultrasound, because I know at that 6-week mark, you can see a heartbeat. So eventually I was given that. Lo and behold, my intuition was right. I was still pregnant. It turned out I had a subchorionic hemorrhage, which is basically a bruise, if you will, within the uterus. But typically they go away. They're actually quite common, and they go away within a week or so. And so,
was that causing the bleeding that made you think you're having a miscarriage?
Yeah, that was the main cause. So that week, I was obviously just praying, okay, Lord, it's gonna go away. Let everything be fine. And to make a very long story somewhat shorter, we ended up going home from our trip a couple weeks early because I was continuing having those issues. I went and saw my doctor back home in Arizona. And she said the hemorrhage had actually doubled in size, which is not
Really?
common. And so I was put on bed rest immediately. I want to say it was maybe week 7 of my pregnancy. Severe bed rest, and I have 2 little ones at home. So it was just kind of a more of a mental challenge, if you will. Throughout those few weeks, I continued to have hemorrhaging. Every week that I went in, I was doing twice a week checkups with my doctor just because I started to lose a little too much blood on a daily basis.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
So you were bleeding like every day?
Yes, all day, every day.
Did they have to give you like transfusions?
Yes, I ended up going in for regular transfusions. And the goal at this point, if I could make it, was to make it to week 23, because that is technically the week of viability. Every week I went in, my hemorrhage had somehow doubled in size. Yeah, and it should have been going the other direction. But I would say week 9, my doctor really started begging me, if you will, to terminate. And my doctor is not necessarily a doctor that would push that. I have had conversations with her in the past with my previous children. She is pro-life. But
wow.
she really didn't see a successful exit for me personally through this pregnancy, let alone the baby. And so at week 9, after she had kind of asked me that, please, there's nothing I can do past week 15 in the state of Arizona to help you or have an abortion. You'll have to go out of state, if we get to that point. And I will be honest, Rebecca, like my entire life, the Lord has really put on my heart justice for babies. And that's something I've always been passionate about, something I've always wanted to fight for locally, just the life of the unborn. And to be in the position where your doctor is basically begging you to abort your baby for your life to continue, I really at that moment felt the weight of the position of the woman on the other side. I think that I had been speaking to my whole life.
Wow.
It was truly the Lord who gave me the stamina and the strength, but there was not a moment in my mind where I ever felt inclined to consider to terminate. And as a believer, like that is, it feels silly to say like pregnancy 101, but that's not even something you would consider.
Yeah.
And so to be in that position that I kind of had heard about in the past, and the women that I would talk to, it was hard. But I think that through the medical trauma I had been through, the Lord was really preparing me to be able to speak to those women now that I'm on the other side and say, I have been in your position before. And life is always the answer.
Your doctor was pro-life, but she wanted you to abort the baby. Was her reasoning basically that this baby's going to kill you, so you need to get an abortion, or this baby's not going to live anyways? What was her reasoning behind that, since that's not really her stance?
That's a good question. She did have kind of a dual perspective.
Okay.
She did not see me making it past week 9 of pregnancy at all.
You or the baby?
The baby.
Okay.
She also did not see me making it had I gone past week 9 of pregnancy, because the blood loss was so severe.
Oh.
Yes. So it was to terminate, to save my life, but she also didn't think the baby would make it at all.
What were you thinking when you were going in and they were saying it's doubling in size instead of shrinking? Were you discouraged? What were you feeling in that moment?
I was very discouraged. In my heart, like I literally bet my life on it. And if you were to ask me, in my heart of hearts, I thought I was going to make it and my baby was going to make it. I just had this like peace in my heart about it. So to hear that it had doubled every ultrasound, which is only like a couple hours really in between, was very discouraging. And through that, though, every ultrasound, my baby was doing fine. She was sucking her thumb, waving high, doing all the things you hope to see as well on an ultrasound.
That's amazing.
And I got even more discouraged as the weeks went on.
Because when she said to terminate, what did your husband say?
So we had a little bit of My husband and my parents supported me, hands down. They knew my decision. At the same time, my husband didn't want his wife to die.
No, obviously.
My parents didn't want their daughter to die. So they at one point, I do remember, they were very concerned that I was so headstrong and so determined to not terminate. I did have about 3 perinatal doctors come in and kind of give me the nudge from my OB saying, hey, you don't understand the outcome possibilities. So they went over a list of honestly maybe 10 different outcomes, that the baby could have this issue, you could have this issue. And they were kind of brought in to encourage me to terminate.
So what ultimately made you decide not to terminate your daughter is you had a peace and you feel like that was from the Lord.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
Just knowing that I'm not going to terminate my child. I'm going to fight for my baby.
I'll be honest, it wasn't even a big decision for me.
Wow.
It was just the most obvious thing you do. You don't terminate. It wasn't even and that's not saying like from me, that is literally from God that he gave me that peace of mind that I could just stick through with that answer because that was the only answer.
No, I've experienced that peace in very difficult circumstances. So I know exactly what you're talking about. That peace is from God.
Yeah.
I mean, it's basically like an anchor, and it's basically telling you to trust him and that you can lean into him and listen to him. And that peace is supposed to be our umpire in our life. It's supposed to guide us. And so this is such a powerful and poignant example of how in such an extreme situation, how imperative it is to listen to the Lord, to listen to the Holy Spirit and follow that peace, because that peace will not lead you astray. So week 10, you said they put you in the hospital. It was the youngest gestation ever in the history of the hospital. You're there for 2 weeks. You go home. So I'm assuming that at some point it was okay and they sent you back, but then you ended up right back in. So what happened then?
Yeah, they would send me home because there was nothing left to do for me. There was no other way they could help me. So then I'd go to like an outpatient transfusion center instead of getting blood in the hospital. Every time I went home, though, honestly, it was 1 or 2 days. And then I'd end up back in there 2 or 3 weeks.
Would you bleed? Like what would happen to make you go back to the hospital?
Bleed so severely that I almost pass out. I was just I was, it's like I don't want to be too much, but
oh, it's okay.
The level of bleeding was just, my body couldn't produce enough blood to keep up.
Oh my gosh.
With me,
I'm
like,
shocked they
literally
sent
functioning.
you home.
Yeah, that was also a problem.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So you ended up back in, and so you come back in at week 12, and then what happened at week 14?
Week 14, so at that point I had been in there 2 weeks for this other stay. At week 14 and 6 days, they had brought in 3 doctors, perinatal doctors. That was the last day that they could help me in terms of doing a DNC termination to
in the state of
help
Arizona.
save my life in the state of Arizona. Week 15, and I denied, of course. I remember my parents were bawling, my husband was bawling, and I had 3 perinatals sitting there like begging me to make this decision. My doctor then came in the next day when I was officially 15 weeks. And I remember she was a little upset that morning. She said, "You have tied my hands. My hands are officially tied for you. You are between a rock and a hard place. And I can't tell you the outcome of what this pregnancy is going to be, whether you'll be able to make it or not. But I just want to let you know I'm going to do everything I can with the way that you have put me in this position."
Oh gosh.
Yes. And I actually love my doctor, but I think she was really scared. She's been a high-risk OB for 40 years, and she's never had this situation before. So the next week, after I had another ultrasound, I had some other things. So I had complete placenta previa, in addition to the subchorionic hemorrhage.
What's that?
Where the placenta completely covers your cervix, and so the chance of bleeding out from your placenta is extremely high. So I had all of these issues that circle around, honestly, blood. And I think at the end of my pregnancy, this is kind of like down the road from the story, I just remember looking at my daughter who was in the newborn baby bin. You know how that clear bin is kind of iconic. You always dream of seeing your baby there. And I was sitting there looking at her, and I was looking at the blood transfusion I was receiving. And I was thinking to Laura, I was like, why was this whole pregnancy an issue with blood? And it really kind of just hit me that it was a perfect example of like Christ died for us, shed his blood for us so that we can live. And it was that moment, that afternoon after I had her and I was receiving more blood, that it really just made me appreciate on a very, very minimal level that God gave his only son for us. And nowhere near the experience that, God went through seeing his son die. But I think it opened up a new appreciation and a new way for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you walk through that valley of the shadow of death, he is with you there, but he will give you a revelation in the trial that you will never receive on the mountaintop.
Totally.
And that's one of those moments.
Yes.
And it just touches me because, having kids, I think, is one of the closest experiences to, experiencing like the love of God.
Yeah.
The easy parts and the hard parts, So your OB says, my hands are tied. It's 15 weeks. What happens from there? You're trying to get to week 23 because if you deliver your baby, it's viable outside the womb. When all this was going on and they wanted you to abort and the placenta had moved over your cervix and all this kind of stuff, when they would do the ultrasounds, what was your baby like at this point?
Perfect.
Really?
Yeah. She was perfect.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
She was growing perfectly, right measurements, very active.
You were just the one that was like almost dying every day.
I was a ticking time bomb.
Yeah, my goodness.
She waved high every single time.
Aww.
She was kicking, sucking her thumb, literally the most, like a perfect human being. No problems whatsoever. That was at 15 weeks that I was, told my doctor had her hands tied. And so I stayed in there. And week 18, I had a severely short cervix. It was 1 centimeter. I had the placenta previa, and I had a subchorionic hemorrhage at this point. At week 18 also, I started having a partial placental abruption.
And that's when the placenta starts coming out of the cervix?
Placental abruptions when it starts detaching from the uterus.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the baby essentially could
die,
could lose its oxygen,
because the
all the nutrients,
placenta
everything.
is what gives life to the baby.
Absolutely.
So if the placenta starts to detach, that's going to be,
Yeah, and it can survive certain percentage of detachment. And mine was at one point it was somewhat minimal, so she was actually still fine. She was measuring perfectly on track, still active, everything. And I just kind of continued in this pattern of staying in the hospital, continuing to get transfusions. I started getting plasma, started getting iron transfusions as well. And I was told way back, even from week 9, my doctor said, it's not every day, but every minute you are pregnant is a miracle.
Wow.
Yes. And I even though my doctor is pro-life, the fact that she kind of couldn't believe that Mila was still kicking and growing and just doing exactly what she should be doing at this stage was a true miracle every minute. So I was great. Every morning I woke up, I thanked the Lord first thing that I was alive, and then that, my daughter was still growing.
Instead of being discouraged, you more just took an attitude and position of gratitude that you were just alive another day and that baby Mila was still growing and was okay. Or was it both? It was all the emotions?
There were some days when I did have the ultrasounds. I had ultrasounds twice a day that I was a bit discouraged if my hemorrhage had grown or if they hadn't seen any improvement. I was kind of hoping and praying that God would give me the miracle of one day they ultrasound me and it just disappeared.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be incredible? And I had so many ultrasound technicians, and nurses, and doctors coming in all day, every day, cardiologists, everything. And I really wanted to kind of just share that miracle with them because they had never seen this. In all of their years of expertise, they had never seen this particular condition before. And I just, every time they would ask me, how are you doing? I was like, honestly, I'm praying and I'm just trusting that God's going to give me this miracle. And that's one of the reasons we named our daughter Mila, because it means miracle. And so we were genuinely if she makes it, she is a miracle. Every baby is. But in this particular position, we were just hoping for that miracle. I was really hoping that it would just disappear one day. But it didn't, and that's okay. Refined through trials. And I would say it was really hard mentally. I would listen to Christian music all day, every day.
Yeah, because you're like stuck in this hospital
Stuck in a hospital bed. Yeah. My mom would come in. Everyone tried visiting me. My husband would bring the kids in. But you're essentially in there kind of alone with you, the baby you're growing, God, and that's about it, And I think also that isolation, it just makes you realize like what you need to live.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have your house full of all your things. You don't need them. You really just need what's hidden in your heart at that point, and your faith and what you can rely on. I would say the culmination of all of it really happened November 8th. I started going into heavy labor.
How far were you at this point?
I was almost 21 weeks. So I was 20 weeks and 6 days exactly. I started going into labor Wednesday morning at like 7 a.m. They called my doctor. She ran over from her house.
Were you having contractions in the full thing?
Severe contractions,
Oh my gosh. What were you thinking?
To be honest, I was in so much pain.
Yeah.
And they weren't regular contractions.
Because you'd had two babies before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. And we found out later it wasn't just labor. It was part of my placental abruption, which is, I didn't know at the time, but apparently one of the most painful things you can experience as a human. I did not know that. It's literally two organs tearing apart.
Oh.
Yes, I know. As if having a baby wasn't hard enough.
I have three
That's
kids.
not fun.
That's why I'm just like dying over here because I just imagine how
not fun.
painful that would be.
Really painful.
Gosh.
And I was losing so much blood at the same time. So I was, I want to say I was like in and out of consciousness. I was very, very dizzy.
Oh my goodness.
I was losing so much that everything started to go blurry. And I was so close to making it. At that point, they said, the goal's not 23 weeks anymore. If we can get you to 22 weeks, Mila would have maybe a 30% chance of survival. That's the size that they're able to try to intubate. And so I was only 7 days away from making it to 22 weeks. And, as a mom, like when you're pregnant, a lot happens in 7 days. A lot happens in 1 day,
Mm-hmm.
Growth-wise. And so my goal at that point was 22 weeks. This entire time, I had the most incredible prayer group of friends. I had a text thread.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
Prayer was imperative in your situation, right?
Unbelievable. There are sometimes when I think I skipped a couple of things because in October, the beginning of October, I had been in the hospital 2 weeks. They sent me home. I was home 2 days. I was sitting on the couch and I started having stroke symptoms.
Oh my gosh.
I know. It's like the story that never ends. I'm not kidding you. So I was home 2 days. I started having stroke symptoms.
What were they? Like
the entire right side of my face fell.
Oh my God,
Yes.
I'd be freaked out.
I was freaking out. And I was still in bed rest, mind you. So I had been on
scary.
bed rest. Yeah. And everything started to vignette and get super small and blurry. Couldn't see. I stood up and I screamed for my parents. They came running in. During the day, I stayed at my parents' house while my husband was working. So I screamed. I was like, I think I'm having a stroke. My mom's like, your whole side of your face is down. I'm rushing you to the ER. So they rushed me in. I had very high blood pressure. I've had preeclampsia with a previous pregnancy. So they were a bit worried about that. We did an EKG. The EKG showed signs of a stroke as well. So I had my mom text my prayer group of girlfriends. So when you have these symptoms and you're at the ER, they rush you into an MRI. So I got such fast service being pregnant and all these issues I've been having. They rushed me into an MRI, and my mom just asked my friends, like, please pray now. She's in the MRI. And when I came out, they redid an EKG, and everything was perfect. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Did your face go back? I mean,
It did.
obviously, I'm looking at you.
I know, right? Like,
But
no,
did it go back in that moment?
It went back after the MRI. I came out, and I said, I think I can lift my face up again.
Oh,
my mom's
my
like,
gosh.
you look normal. And so that was another really scary point of this pregnancy. But my friends and my mom's friends, my family, everyone, do not underestimate the power of prayer. And I feel like that sounds like such a cheesy saying, but it gives life. It is the only thing I actually texted my friends today on my prayer group. Thank you so much again, because I'm almost a year later. I would not be here today if it wasn't for your prayers.
Wow.
It's true. They prayed for me every day. My friends got together in my other friend's house all together, and they laid hands on each other to pray for me when I was in the hospital. Friends came to the hospital and prayed over me. It's just like I know the outcome would have been different if it wasn't for prayer. 100%. 100%.
And so after that, you were able to go almost 4 more weeks because you almost hit 21.
So so November 8th when I went into labor,
Yeah.
that Wednesday, they put me on a magnesium drip, which, to be honest, can be really miserable. It's a really high level of magnesium, so it makes you extremely groggy and kind of miserable. My doctor suggested I stay on it for as long as I can, 3 to 4 weeks if I could. And I said, I don't care. I'm sitting in a hospital room anyways. Let's try it. We started that. That helped me get through the next 24 hours. While I was still on a mag drip, the next morning, November 9th, I had severe pain. My husband happened to go home. He spent the night, but he had happened to go home at like 6 a.m. that morning, take a shower, get freshened up, say hi to the kids, and he came back. And so at 8 a.m., he was back. He had some calls. So I was just sitting in the hospital bed. All of a sudden, I had extreme hemorrhaging all at once. I had pushed my call button for my nurse to come. No one came.
What?
And this is the first time this has happened because they were busy. It's not that they refused to come, but this was the first time when I knew in my heart this is an emergency. I started to get so dizzy I couldn't think straight. So I texted my husband, I really need help ASAP. Please come in. He came in. I was hemorrhaging so much that the room was, you could see how much I was hemorrhaging. There was a really big issue. So he ran to go find a nurse, couldn't find anybody, ran to labor and delivery. He found the head nurse at labor and delivery. He said, you don't understand, my wife's in antepartum. She needs help. And he's like, she's hemorrhaging. And so she came over, she pushed it's like a code red button if you're hemorrhaging too much and like your life's at risk. So code red, and the mass transfusion team comes up. At that point, I had precautionary 4 lines in case this ever happened. They would have 4 lines to deliver blood. And so they started mass transfusing me by hand. All the nurses came in. I had the most incredible nurse team. I will say also, my nurses prayed over me every day.
Aww.
And that was such a blessing. Like if you're a nurse and you're out there and you pray over your patients, there's nothing better.
Yeah,
There's
I
nothing
agree.
better. I was so grateful for them. And I still talk to a lot of them today. So the mass transfusion team came in and they were hand pumping blood in me. Usually it goes through a warmer. And I was in so much pain. I was so lightheaded and dizzy. And the thing I thought I was going to die of the most out of all this was the cold from the blood not being warmed up.
Because they couldn't wait to do that?
Yeah, there's no time. So they were pumping 4 units of blood in me at a time. And
so you felt super cold? You felt like it was going to take you out?
Yes. Yeah. And I just think, it's another moment of like looking back, realization, like when Christ was on the cross and he lost all that blood as well. Like, way different level, but he must have felt so cold.
Yeah.
And that's just a feeling that it's so much different than being in the snow, being in the AC. It's like a cold of death.
Oh.
And it's a really a moment that stood out to me, and I will never forget that feeling. Just going through that, the pain, the dizziness, lightheadedness, it was on another level. And I remember I could barely put words together because I was just on my way down, and I turned to my husband. I was like, I don't think she's going to make it. So they continued pumping blood in, and they called my doctor. My doctor rushed over. And one thing I forgot one story. This is like my favorite answer to prayer through this whole thing. I don't know how I forgot it. Okay. So the first November 8th, when I started going into labor, and they put me on the mag drip, they did the ultrasound that afternoon. And Mila's heartbeat was exactly 144 beats per minute the entire pregnancy. Wasn't 145, 143, it's 144 exactly. Every ultrasound. And they genuinely couldn't believe that she was still perfect, you know? I had asked my nurse that morning that I started going into labor, what heartbeat of a baby do you see in utero? When does it hit a certain level? And what is that level that the baby cannot recover from? If you see that heartbeat level, what is that number? She said 70. When a baby hits 70 in the womb, typically can't recover from that. And so this was the first day in my entire pregnancy. I prayed and asked God, like, this was the first day I really kind of decided in my heart, maybe this isn't going to work. And my whole prayer the entire time was, Lord, if this baby's not supposed to be here with me on earth, like, that's your decision. That's not my decision. I don't want to make that decision. Please let that be your act, not mine. And that afternoon, after I asked the nurse, and she said, when it hits 70 beats per minute, that's when the baby doesn't come back. I really, in my heart, had a feeling for the first time, I don't think Mila's going to make it. That was the first time. After almost 6 months, 5 months of pregnancy. And I just remember praying, Lord, I ask if this is your decision to take Mila, please make her heartbeat 70 beats per minute. That was my prayer. That way, it's like I'm bargaining with God. I'm not bargaining with him, but I'm just asking him to show me that it's his job and not mine. Mm-hmm. And so I said, Lord, if it's 70 beats per minute, I will know that you are taking her and that my work here is done with this pregnancy. And the next morning, when I went into severe labor, my doctor rushed in, and I couldn't tell you what I signed because I was not mentally capable of understanding much, to be honest. I signed a form that said I could have a hysterectomy if I needed it to save my life. I signed a form saying I might not make it out of surgery.
Oh my gosh.
At that moment, my doctor rushed in, anesthesiologist, I probably had 20 people in the room. And they did one final ultrasound before they take you into the OR to confirm, that the baby is maybe not doing well, or maybe the baby is doing well, because my doctor was really worried about delivering Mila if she was still perfectly fine. So that morning, she put the ultrasound machine on. They got a heartbeat. Mila's heartbeat was exactly 70 heartbeats per minute. And it wasn't 69, it wasn't 71. It was exactly what I asked God. If this is your will and not mine, let me know. And he did. And at that moment, I was in so much pain. I just remember feeling this peace come over me. And I know it sounds really silly, but it did feel warm. And I was having all this cold blood pumped into me. And I felt this warmth of peace and understanding and just confirmation that I'm doing this. You chose as far as you could to give her life, and I'm going to take her home. And in that moment, I really did have a sigh of relief, if you will. I kind of felt, I think I'm going to live. It's still a big question mark. I think I'm going to live. And they rushed me into the OR. I didn't really get to say bye to anybody. I still had my regular clothes on. They just cut through it all. And in the OR, I remember I was fighting them. They were trying to intubate me. And I was just fighting so hard because I was so upset. I was only 7 days away from her making it. But as soon as I kind of let them start to intubate me and give me anesthesia, I had this weird peace that I truly cannot put into words. I felt I don't know if I'm going to die right now. There's a good chance I could have died. But I feel so at peace in my soul that I'm going to see the Lord.
Mm.
And it's one of those things you kind of hope for here on earth. Like, when I die, like, I think I'm going to go to heaven, And as believers, we have that confidence that we do. But even as believers, we're human. And there's always maybe somewhat sort of like did I do enough? Did I pray enough? And in that moment, I was so blessed that the Lord kind of gave me that peace of, if you die right now, I'm going to see you.
The assurance of your salvation.
Yeah.
Because it's not, because we can have those moments of doubt, but the truth is it's because of what he did that we're assured. And he gave you peace that whatever's going to happen with you, like, I've got you.
Yeah.
And so they take you into surgery. So so you were in labor. What happened? Did you deliver the baby or did they C-section the baby?
Yeah, so I had a emergency C-section. They had to cut for a hysterectomy. So I had a bit more recovery than I would have liked. But in surgery, my doctor said she had never seen a placenta like this in her life. It was completely disintegrated.
What?
She doesn't even know how Mila had made it the last week or month or anything. Completely disintegrated. For all the moms out there, they'll probably understand. But when she opened me up, it literally like fell out, is what she said. There's no explanation for why my baby made it as far as she did.
Really?
Yes, and my Mila was perfect.
Aww.
I went septic. And so I had to be treated for sepsis. And I think another blessing is that the amniotic fluid and the sac that Mila had around her, the sepsis hadn't even like touched her. So she was never in pain, which is kind of a miracle in itself.
No, that's a miracle.
She never felt pain. She only felt love. She only felt life. As I said, I'm really close with the nurses. So I had asked the nurse who held her entire life. She was born alive. So she was born alive. She was born exactly at 21 weeks. She lived exactly 21 minutes.
Wow.
And her due date was March 21st.
Wow.
And so, I believe the Lord uses numbers.
I do too.
He has so many reasons, but the number 21 in the Hebrew alphabet is the Shin. And, another name for God is Almighty and divine power. And so I would say, I think the Lord blessed me with that as well, that there were 3 instances where 21 was on her life.
And the producer just showed me today is the 21st.
Stop it. Oh my God. That is unbelievable.
That's
oh my gosh, I'm
so crazy. It's like only God.
I didn't even think about that.
That's
How
the
wild.
thing. He cares about like every little detail.
Oh my goodness. Even a year later, he's like giving me
He's being faithful to you. Because you didn't even ask to be on this podcast, but you wanted to tell her story.
Yeah.
So God opened up the door.
Yeah.
Aww.
Sorry.
No, don't.
I was thinking I'm not going to cry, then I do.
It's okay.
But I think another big thing is, there are things. Oh my gosh, it's crazy.
It's hard. Once you start, it's hard to stop.
It is. It's so hard.
So you can take your time. It's okay to cry. I cry on here all the time.
This is hard. I think it's interesting because she shouldn't have been able to survive, and I personally didn't know babies born at 21 weeks could survive on their own, even if it was for a minute, that is even life. Like, a lot of people, I've gotten comments for like, oh, she was only 21 weeks. Yeah, but she lived 21 minutes on her own.
Yeah.
That's life. She lived 21 minutes.
She lived outside the womb.
She could have been 21 years old. She could have been 100 and still alive, And I think just a really big part of this all that has really like motivated me, if you will, is that abortions are still happening at 21 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just that women have been told a lie that it's not a baby yet. You're only a little over halfway done with your pregnancy. When in reality, like my daughter, She looked exactly like my oldest daughter. She had features that I could make out and see, and I could see her hair. And she lived and she breathed on her own. And it might have just been 21 minutes, but that's how long God had her life for, planned out,
It still counts.
It still counts. It still counts. And the nurse who
held her
was handed her, yes, Cindy, she's an incredible, incredible person. She held her entire 21 minutes, and she wrote me the nicest email telling me that she spoke life into her.
Oh, that's gonna make me
She
cry.
spoke truth into her. She told her, your mommy fought so hard for you to be able to live past this. And I know that when Mila did take her last breath, she saw the face of Jesus. And I know that because the nurse who was holding her entire life said she took her last breath and then she smiled.
Oh my gosh.
And when I first got to hold her after I woke up from surgery, she was still smiling.
No.
Yes. And I know that it's just because she saw the Lord. And she's like, what a nice thing to first see.
Yeah, seriously.
Can you imagine you in your mom's womb and then the first thing you get to see is Jesus? That is the life I would like. But yeah, and she had one hand up by her face and the other one on her heart.
Oh my gosh.
And then she smiled, and that was her last breath. And yeah, I think it's just important, through this whole story, I've fought for abortion, for pro-life to save babies. I was Miss Arizona USA a million years ago. And I realized it's probably hard for a woman who's in a really hard situation, pregnant, to be told, don't abort, save your baby, by a woman who's in a crown and a sparkle dress, who hadn't had kids yet. Compared to now, I'm a mom of 3, one's in heaven. I did have a life-altering pregnancy. I almost died. I lost 40% of my blood. My organs should have shut down. But I think God gave me that experience to help me to relate to women who are in a hard position.
Yeah.
And I can't promise that the Lord is going to save everybody who's in this position. The moms, it's a bad world, but I know that I can do what I can do with the story I've been given.
Yeah.
To try to save babies.
Yeah.
And so I'm just praying that Mila's story to teach others that at 21 weeks, she lived on her own. She's a full baby.
Yeah.
Maybe it can change one mom's mind to not abort, even late term, early, however far along they are.
Yeah. And like you said, you can't promise an outcome, but you can promise that God is faithful.
Yeah.
And he proved that to you through your story. The thing that really strikes me, I'll try to say this without crying, is that if you would have gotten the abortion, she would have felt that.
That's right.
People try to justify it, and but the truth of the matter is that the baby is alive. The baby can feel, and she would have felt that. And instead, you gave your daughter the gift of life, and you allowed her to live and feel your love, and you were willing to sacrifice your life for that. And that is, I can't think of a greater example of God's love than that. Because the Bible says, no greater love than this, that a man would lay his life down for his friends, right? And the thing that strikes me is that if you would have had that abortion, she would have felt it. And when they got her, she was completely unaffected. So she never felt pain.
No.
She always felt your love. And then she was alive on this earth. She was put into an arms of love. And then she got to meet Jesus face to face. And so Mila only knew love. Yeah. And if you would have aborted that, you would have had to live. If you would have aborted your daughter, you would have had to live with knowing that, because abortion affects women.
Oh, that's drastically.
That people don't say. And it's it's traumatic. Oh. And you would have had to live with that. Instead, even though it almost took you, you can live with the peace. You followed that peace God gave you, and you can live with the peace that I gave my daughter life. I chose life. And you were kind of if I perish, I perish, but I'm choosing life. But God was faithful. He sustained you. He sustained Mila up to that time. He sustained her to 21 minutes. Her placenta was gone. She should have survived as long as she did. And so even though it's not the outcome that you wanted, obviously you would want your daughter here. It's still a miracle. And of course, we don't understand all the answers, and it's still going to hurt. I know it has to still hurt. And so it's not to negate any of that pain, but God was faithful, even we don't understand why. And I'm so proud of you for choosing life, for fighting when so many people around you were saying to, get the abortion, and willing to just lay your life down for your daughter. And it's a powerful story. So I want to hear about, so you wake up from surgery.
Oh, yeah.
What was that like? Was she just right there? Or
No. So one of the most...
where was your husband? Because
my husband was there. My husband was like on the floor crying the entire time I was in surgery. I was in surgery about 3 hours.
Did they let him be in there, or was he out? Okay,
no.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, this was it was actually like an emergency. So
yeah,
my
obviously.
doctor literally left her appointment. She left a patient in the room. My doctor and I were really close. We texted every day, and she came and saw me every day on our lunch break. And when they rushed me back, they were running to the OR, because I told you I was like hemorrhaging so much. It was a lot. And they had bowls that they were filling up, and it was just a point where it was...
With blood?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my
I
gosh.
genuinely shouldn't be here, because I lost over 35% of all the blood in my body. And when you hit 35%, your organs start shutting down. They just don't have enough blood to pump. So if it wasn't for, which is a funny story too, Cindy, she was the one who was pumping the blood in me and the mass transfusion right before I went into the OR. And she's also the nurse who held my baby her entire life. So thank you, Cindy.
Yeah.
But so I rushed into OR. I remember waking up in the room. I was still in my like regular clothes. I wasn't in a hospital gown because I'd been in the hospital so long. There was no point. Like, just wear your normal clothes. So I woke up and I was very out of it. And I told my doctor, I feel great. And I don't think my brain had clicked yet with everything because I was in such severe pain before.
Yeah, for so long.
For so long.
So you finally had relief.
Yes. For over 5 months, I was in such pain that I woke up and the first thing I remember saying was, I feel so good. I feel good. And one special nurse position, which maybe I'm ignorant, I don't know. I didn't know it existed, is a bereavement nurse.
Yeah.
And I just hadn't experienced the need for that yet in my life. And I had the most incredible bereavement nurse. After I had kind of woken up and had some water, maybe 20 minutes later, she said, "Would you like to meet Miss Mila?" And I said, of course, like I want to see my baby. And there's something that happens when you go through medical trauma. You know, your brain doesn't process things properly. Yeah. And so I had a bout for like a month. Actually, sometimes I still have it even a year later. I had a bout of like phantom baby, I think is what my therapist had called it, where it didn't process that she wasn't alive. And so she brings her in, and she's wrapped beautifully. The bereavement program at Honor Health was amazing. They have beautiful blankets, everything you could possibly imagine for a baby. And Mila was wrapped in pink blankets, and I got to hold her. The first thing I thought when I saw her was, she looks like my daughter, Sienna, my older daughter. And twins, they could have been twins. And she still had her smile on her face and her hand up and her heart on her chest. And it was a lot. You look at her, I thought she looked like my oldest daughter, and then I just started crying because I don't know, it's hard to, it's really hard to process.
Yeah.
You know, you go in thinking you're going to leave with a baby, and then you end up leaving with a box of like handprints and a grief book and a CD on how to get through the next month. But I think what I loved the most about the experience after having her was the respect that people showed Mila.
No.
And she was a real human to all the nurses, to everybody. They called her Mila. Oh, look how pretty Mila is. They called her by her name. And And it breaks my heart to think about the babies who, are aborted.
Yeah.
Technically born at that phase, aren't given a name. They're not respected. They're not given that chance of being acknowledged as a human. And that's really hard to think about because my daughter was. And, we got to hold her. My kids were the ones that really broke me when they came in. They were at school.
How old were they at the time?
So my son was 3 and my daughter was 5. My son wasn't in school yet, but my daughter was. So my dad actually went to go get the kids from school because my mom was with me and my husband was with me. And my kids were so excited for the baby. They would feel her kick every day. They would go and buy her toys. Like we'd go to Target or wherever and they had to buy Mila something. Aww. They drew her pictures like, welcome baby Mila. We had her little room set up and all that. And I remember my daughter walked in. I was sitting there. Mila was in the baby crib next to the bed with a blanket over her. And my daughter walked in and she saw the baby crib. She's like, oh, Mommy, why do you have the baby thing here? And she was so excited. And I said, get up here. I want to talk to you. So I put her on the bed with me. And I said, I did have baby Mila. I had her this morning. And she was so excited. And then this was like the hardest part of actually the whole pregnancy. I said, but she didn't make it. She was born 7 days too early. She couldn't live. She just started bawling.
Oh,
my daughter's like the sweetest girl in the world. And I said, do you want to hold her? She said, of course, she's my sister. And so I got her out and covered her. And, she's tiny. She's 21 weeks. So she held her and she bawled the rest of the day. And I was just it's one of those moments in life where you can't prepare for it, but what you say to your kids is crucial. And the only thing I could get out in that moment was like, God is still good. Like, this is not what we wanted, but God is still good. And she's still your little sister, and she's in heaven. And I don't know if that stuck with her, but I'm hoping down the line, if she's ever in a hard situation, that my daughter remembers that God is still good. Even through this whole experience, I think that's really what I want her to walk away with. My son was young. He was 3 at the time, and he stared at her. He was a little apprehensive to hold her, but he just stared at her and said how cute and pretty she was. And he said, Mommy, why isn't she crying? Why isn't she kicking? Is she hungry? Does she need to eat? And I was like, no, she's not alive. And the concept of death at an early age is really hard to grasp.
Yeah.
And it's hard to explain as a mom. It's like, how do you explain death, to little kids? And my kids were fantastic. I just kept praying that they would be able to stomach it. So that was the first day, really hard, really hard. That night, I kept waking up to feed her. It's like a phantom baby thing. I kept waking up to feed her, which is funny. As a mom, I woke up every 45 minutes, like you're supposed to feed a newborn. On the dot, woke up. I thought I heard her crying. And she was sitting next to me in her little baby bassinet, but I just kept waking up to feed her. I thought I heard her crying. So then it was kind of that wave of emotions again. Every time you wake up, like, oh, my baby's dead. My baby's not alive. And I think that was really hard as well. Just the reminder every hour and a half. Like, no. Your body automatically goes into feed mode, which I learned later on. It doesn't matter when you deliver. Your body automatically goes into the rhythm of what the newborn would need.
So you were producing milk?
Oh, I had milk for a month. Yeah, I had milk for a month. I would wake up every hour to feed a newborn, hour and a half. Your body goes through postpartum hair loss, everything.
Yeah.
And once again, it's a reminder.
Every time.
Of
the loss.
Yes, a loss. And there are so many women who've gone through loss, and there are so many babies that have been delivered against their own will. I just think about the moms who don't have the support that I had, and they had to make really hard decisions alone, whether it's termination or not. But I'm just grateful that I was able to get out those first few months with my family and God supporting me, because now I feel like I'm able to take a breath. It's taken me a full year to kind of look back and be like, okay, it's nothing you planned for, but if you happen to go through a loss in the future, one of the best things I did for my kids' grief was letting them be part of the process. So my kids got Mila ready for her box. They put lotion on her, they held her, they wrapped her up in a blanket, and it helped them process kind of what had happened. And it helped them feel like they are a big brother, a big sister to Mila. I think that was really important too.
Yeah. And they took Mila?
Yes. So we buried her. She's a beautiful little
that's good.
gray berry. Yeah.
So you were able to bury her?
Yes,
Okay.
we were able to bury. The kids, when you leave the hospital after you have a baby that passed, they have literally like a box, like a purple box for us. And it's beautiful. It's lined in satin and whatnot. And again, it was like the level of respect that every baby deserves.
Yeah.
She's buried with a teddy bear and like a little blanket. And Julie, our bereavement nurse, she got her all ready. They escort the baby down to the morgue, which I didn't know. Two security guards escort her down.
Wow.
And then you just coordinate with wherever you choose to bury. But I think it's just nice that I'm able to look back and just see a blessing of like all the miracles that we had. I would say my favorite miracles are that God answered the prayer that her heartbeat was 70 minutes.
Yeah.
70 beats per minute when he chose to take her. That was such a blessing, like not having to live with the guilt of taking my baby out.
Yeah.
That's a blessing in itself. And then I would say the other miracle of like, I gotta live.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lord, for that. And then my favorite miracle is that Mila's in heaven.
Yeah.
And that's a gift we all get. And we all are offered. Mm-hmm. And the fact that my baby, I know she's in heaven, that is the biggest miracle of all.
That you'll get to see her again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, man. What would you say, how did you handle this past year? How did you get through the mourning process? What would your advice be to mothers who are going through this right now?
I feel like I'm still in it because you still wake up every day without a baby, and I think for me, the thing that really helped the most was allowing myself to be sad. Yeah. Allowing myself to be upset. I personally didn't feel angry a lot because I think God gave me so many miracles that I asked for, so many blessings. And I think looking back and seeing, whether it's the exact reason God allowed something to happen or not, looking back on your story, maybe going through loss, baby loss, whatever kind of loss it is, see the blessings that God has given you, like search for them. And then remember, life on earth is so short, so short. Sometimes I'm so grateful for that, that God allows things he can prevent. And I think that is because he needs people to use the stories that they've been giving for his glory. And that's a huge responsibility. I think sometimes loss is very easy to see as like, why did God let that happen to me? Mm-hmm. And I think, moreover, we need to maybe shift our perspective and say, God has given me the responsibility of this experience. How am I going to use that experience to share about him? And it's not easy. Yeah. I wouldn't say it's always easy. And there are people out there with much more difficult situations than I went through. Like I think about children with cancer. That breaks my heart. And there's always going to be some situation that's worse than yours, even though what you're going through is really hard. I think remembering that and considering it a blessing that you're not at that worst point, I think that's really important. And just honestly, like diving into the word, praying, and allowing yourself to be sad. It's okay.
Yeah, that's definitely in your emotions.
Sad. Yeah.
But processing them.
Yes, I did do a little bit of EMDR therapy, which kind of, when you go through trauma, your brain can't process it. Mm. So when you do EMDR, it relates to the way you sleep. In REM sleep, your eyes go back and forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is kind of, as I've been explained to, is the way that your brain like gets rid of trash, like things that are in your mind that just don't matter. They don't need to be there. And the thing is, when you go through trauma, it gets blocked up. So you do EMDR training, and they do an exercise where your eyes go back and forth, and you relive the moment, and it clears. It allows it to process through your brain and kind of move forward. And I've just done a little bit of that, and I have noticed a difference. But I would say the biggest difference is really waking up every day and just waking up with gratitude and like trying to move forward. I wish I had a perfect solution.
No, I think you're stewarding. I think you have an incredible mindset for someone who's gone through what you've gone through, and you're taking it. You've shifted your whole mindset. You made it not about yourself, where I think so many people would allow themselves to let this take them out. The discouragement, you held on to faith and to hope, and you said, okay, Lord, I'm going to look at this as an opportunity. I'm going to steward this thing that you've given me, and I'm going to let it do as much good. You're going to let Mila's life do as much good as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a beautiful thing. You know what I mean?
Thank you.
And I don't think, honestly, like, I don't have all the answers, and I think that's okay.
Right.
We don't have to have all the answers. We don't have to do everything perfect.
Right.
It's about him being perfect, and we're in him.
Yeah.
And each day, he gives us the grace.
It's
You want
true.
to say something?
I feel like one of the hardest things about being human is you have to be okay with not having all the answers.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's so frustrating.
I know.
A lot of the time. But I think if you can really kind of just take a breath and realize you're not good, like, not that you think you're God. If you can take a breath and realize I'm not going to have all the answers here on earth.
Yeah.
But I still have tomorrow. I've been given today.
Yeah.
You have to wake up and use it.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of the time when you're going through the trenches, it's a lot easier said by someone sitting in a chair, who's not going through that moment at that time. But I know that if we adhere to like God's word and we listen to what he says and we obey him, it'll never return void.
Mm-hmm.
And I could be honestly living with severe guilt and depression right now had I chose to terminate. And I'm just grateful that God gave me the strength to not even consider that, because I think the guilt alone could kill somebody.
Yeah.
The depression of it. And I think it's just really important to remember that if we continue to wake up every day and choose the right next answer, we'll be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, mentally.
Well, thank you.
Thank you
for sharing your story.
It.
And, baby Mila's legacy is going to continue on. And I can't talk about this anymore. I'm going to keep crying. So, Brittany, thank you so much for being here. And just one last encouraging word or prayer, whatever you feel led to do, to the women who are, even the fathers who are listening.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll wrap.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say life is so hard, and there are times and there are days when you just don't think you're going to make it through. You really don't see an out. And you might think you don't understand this situation. This is really a different situation. God's sitting right there with you. He's right there with you in the hospital room by yourself when you're hemorrhaging. He's right there when you're in a really hard situation and you're pregnant and you just don't know how you're going to make it through the pregnancy and beyond. I would say God will help you through that. And if you have gone through a hard situation and you've made the wrong decision, God forgives and God loves you.
Yeah.
Yes. I think post-abortion care is something we really need to hone in on as a Christian community, and just be there as a support system for women who are going through a hard pregnancy or who have been through a hard pregnancy or who have, maybe made a decision that they kind of regret now. I would say through any chapter of your life, God is there with you. You need to look for him and you need to pray, because prayer changes literally everything. And sometimes it takes a while to get in the motion of like what it is you need to pray for, what you're feeling. But God hears everything. Yeah.
That's
so
true.
Good. That is true.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.